Greetings everyone. It's a privilege and a pleasure to host you today for this special session as we get into the GST Survey at 9. And this session is special because we're going to have this conversation with industry experts who have seen this journey as GST gets into its 10th year. And of course, this journey has been a special one for everyone who's been involved with it. Joining me for this conversation today are the eminent industry leaders. We have got Piyusha Gupta. He's the Asia-Pac head of tax for a very well-known company, Concentrix, which is a global giant in the IT/ITES industry. We have Anil Sahani. Anil, of course, represents the indirect tax function at Maruti Suzuki, India's leading automotive industry. And we have Azim Syed. Azim is a CFO at RHI Magnesita, which is, of course, everything to do with the infrastructure space of building heat for the cement, steel, and every manufacturing process in this country. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. It's an absolute privilege to have you on this milestone event as India walks into its first decade of the GST rollout. So I'll start with you, Piyush. The IT/ITES industry during this period of 10 years has become a global giant. And along the journey, your company too has become a global giant in that space. So how would you describe the GST journey over these 9 years?
Thank you, Gokul. GST was of course a landmark tax reform, and for a country like India, the sheer size of the country and the different challenges, multiple businesses, it was always going to be challenging. But that being said, I think the government's intent, the way the GST Council has sought to address issues, I think the overall journey has been quite progressive and we are heading in the right direction. Initially, I think the challenges specifically for the services industry were twofold. One was more around compliances, increased sort of compliances, getting the refunds out, thinking about how to structure your operations. And the other was around meritorious issues, litigation around aspects like place of supply, business models being challenged, especially in cross-border arrangements, issues like intermediary cropping up and threatening the very existence of the industry. But I think that's where the government has been pragmatic and thoughtful to addressing these concerns. And largely, I think the overall sentiment of the industry now is very, very, very positive around GST. Of course, as I said, it's a journey, so it's going to take some more time, and we now should focus more towards a phase of stabilization and bringing more certainty, specifically around aspects of compliance and refunds for the industry.
During this period of the decade, I think one of the statistics that sits with me is that India now exports more on IT/ITES than Saudi Arabia exports oil and gas. So it's been quite a journey for this sector, and I'm so glad that we have the tax framework that works with it.
Absolutely.
Coming to you, Aziz, you guys are really at the core of India's energy intense manufacturing, something which underpins the growth story of any emerging economy. Every emerging economy goes through the cycle of building steel plants, power plants, and everything else. And at the core of it is the stuff that you do. So you see the capex cycle happening. You see the intense infrastructure build that takes place in this country. And you probably see not only the cost accumulation, but also the input tax accumulation that's happening. How do you see GST and the entire credit supply chain moving in this very intense capital industry?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. Just for people who don't know what RHI Magnesita is, we do something called refractories, which basically is useful for heat resistance in high applications wherever it is required. India has this ambition of being a manufacturing hub, and one of the good incentive is that if we get some kind of input tax credit accumulation for things like power and energy, and we are at the force of it because we are absolutely a heavy energy and power intensive industry. One of the things, as you all know that we don't get any type of input tax credit accumulation in case of power and energy. It would be absolutely positive if we kind of get some kind of a leverage on these kind of applications, because this completely blocks our profitability and also the working capital, not only here but across our value chain itself. So this will be an absolute positive if we can get some kind of a leverage on this.
Interesting. And turning to the automotive sector, one of the things that has happened is your sector has gone through a lot of regulatory changes alongside. You had this move from ICE engines all the way down to hybrids into now EVs and so forth. But simultaneously, the tax system has also evolved for you. And I think the GST Council has been quite active in doing things. So what's the type of responsiveness you've seen from the council and the need of this industry? Because you are a pretty significant player in this sector.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So I think firstly, echoing on the introduction of the GST, GST has been a land-changing reform in the country. When we were sitting in 2009-10, we never used to think that how GST will come into a country like our, where there's a state government, central governments, different political parties, but the way the government has evolved it's simply outstanding. The GST Council role has also been very, very wonderful. They have been quite receptive to all the issues, including industry-specific issues. Coming to the auto industry specific, we have been approaching the government on various fronts wherever we found that the law was not consistent with the practice which is followed in the auto industry, or it was not in line with the intent of the government, what the government wanted. A few examples which I could relate, which are very recent. One is on the warranty and the extended warranty. So the government introduced a circular giving a taxation perspective on the extended warranty. But we as an auto industry, we represented the government and the council that the way the extended warranty and the warranties work in the auto sector are somewhat different from how they operate in the FMCG or the white goods sector. The government was very receptive to it. They understood the issue, what is the problem involved, and then they issued a re-clarification circular which automatically solved the entire issue for the auto industry so far as the warranty and the extended warranties was concerned. The second most recent example is relating to a demo car. The demo car which the dealers procure, so the issue was whether they can take the ITC credit or not. The government was kind enough to understand the issue that though in general the vehicles are not eligible for the ITC credit, but for a dealer who is selling the vehicle, for him actually a demo car is actually an input because that is to be used for selling the further cars. And they issued a circular giving a favorable thing that they can also take the ITC credit. So I think all in all, the GST Council and the government officials, they have been quite supportive to not only to the entire industry, but also specific to the auto industry as well. Thank you.
So, while the GST Council has been active in trying to resolve some of the issues, there's a lot of expectations with the announcement that the Prime Minister made last year in August around rate rationalization, which is going to come. And then, of course, the rate rationalization did come and it came in time for the festive season. So, Azim, coming to you, I mean, in this intense supply chain that you see, how did rate rationalization happen? Because when we did the survey, 50% of the industry said it had a positive effect. And then 50% of the industry said it's quite neutral. So where did you and your customers really fall? In the positive or the neutral, or is there a mixed bag?
I think for us it was, let's say, neutral to a little bit no impact. I would put it like that. The positive thing, what we saw was that it got some parity offers with the industry peers, let's call it like that. So that's where we got some favorable, but it got completely negated because we didn't get any kind of a IT tax credit benefit in case of power and energy. That's what we were looking forward for. So there we did not get any benefit, not only for us but across the value chain for us. Good that it supported the automobile industry. The one advantage for that basically was that our customers, who are predominantly steel industrial players, their demand increased. So the only positive was that in the end customer we saw an input, but from a tax perspective or from a rationalization perspective, it did not have any favorable impact for us.
What would you have hoped for?
It's a very good question. I would basically say that One, in terms of power and energy input tax credit, that would really help not only us but the entire industry, because we aspire to be make in India kind of a foray. That's the way we are projecting to the market and to the world. I think this would have had a very positive impact for us. Number two, I mean, to cross-utilize the CGST and IGST across various GSTN, this would have buoyed our entire manufacturing sector per se. Third, as he was saying, simplification. Now that we are stabilized in the GST reform that has come in, we need to focus more on simplification, especially if I have to pick up one. It's about how we kind of use this for players who are operating in multiple states. There's quite a bit of an administrative burden. There's quite a bit of rationalization that's happening in the industry. For example, we are looking at, because we grew inorganically, and after, because we believe in that, that we need to invest capex in putting more additional capabilities in R&D, in getting the technology from our group company, which is predominantly based in Europe. Now, when we do that, we figured out that, okay, our plant network or our factory network needs to be optimized in a certain manner, which means that you kind of, want to move some of the production capabilities from one location to another location. Now, with this, not having this ability to kind of simplified way of operating, it acts as a hurdle for us to kind of go at the pace that our industry demands at. So I think these are the three things that I'll pick up.
So therefore, I guess what you're saying is that agility and flexibility.
And simplification, I will add that word. I think simplification is the key word here. If we do this, because with the digital infrastructure, there's always enough transparency, there is enough data, but how do we reduce the administrative burden and the, as you rightly said, the agility for us to move from one state to another state, as an example, that will help us to go at the pace that our industry is demanding.
Between you and Anil, do you have a point of view as to how the simplification of audits can happen?
I will let Anil respond to that.
So I think on the simplification of the audits, so my take will be that the way the government has moved on the rates, there is a requirement to move on the policies or the procedures also. One of the areas where we see lot of notices coming, lot of audits coming. One was, yes, the initial 2A, 3B reconciliation and all this vendor reconciliation. But over a period of time, I think the vendors and the buyers, they have all matured enough to reconcile between themselves. One of the key area which is still there is on the ITC credit. The list of the negative under the 17.5 is actually a very, very interpretive issue. We are not aware how much is the government revenue, but we will request government, if the 17.5 list, if the government can say either 100% credit is allowed, or they can say, okay, some percentage of your total credit will be deemed to be disallowed as a 17.5. So then all the notices of 17.5, they automatically go away. Because to litigate on whether the building which you have constructed or a office you have done is actually a plant and machinery thing, or it's a repair and maintenance, or it's a capitalized item, it's so painful activity, and the litigation will take on years before it finally reaches the Supreme Court. So I think if on one or two fronts the government may consider the industry request, if they can simplify that procedure, I think many of the litigation and audits will be much simpler for the industry and also for the government.
Just to add on a point, I think I read an amazing stat about 2 months back published in Economic Times that only 2% of the litigation that gets brought into the court has any merit. So we need to think about what is a better threshold and criteria, because today you want to foster an ecosystem for businesses to grow. Tax should not be a barrier, it should be an incentive mechanism for people to set up the hubs and develop further. But this acts like, okay, are we doing the right thing? Yes, we are doing the right thing, but still we get notices. I think this needs to be looked into congruence of why such notices are coming when there's so much of transparency, so much of data, how it can be better utilized. I think that part the government can seriously look into to see how it can be better. Absolutely.
But Piyush, I'll come to you. One of the things that you experience in your sector is global competitiveness and export competitiveness. And I think the government would love to have the same level of export competitiveness for the manufacturing sector and for the other sectors of the economy also, as they've seen in the ITITS. So when you look at export competitiveness and the entire promotion of that place, How do you look at the indirect tax regime and the GST progression on delivering competitiveness to the Indian industry?
Sure. Thanks, Gokul. So you rightly, as you rightly said and alluded to in the beginning as well, the services sector, to my mind, has been the backbone on which is really driving the growth since liberalization came into picture. And the services sector continues to be, the real, push factor towards increasing, India's visibility on the global scale. And having a stable, favorable, and predictable tax regime are always, the bedrock or foundation of any such industry competitiveness. Now, from a policy standpoint, I think we are pretty much sorted. We are not exporting any taxes. Our rules are pretty favorable. There was a big challenge around the whole intermediary issue, which kind of, as I said, was an existential crisis for the entire industry. But good that the government, there were administrative circulars, judicial precedents, but on ground, it was still a big challenge. It was still not being resolved. So good, in the last slew of reforms, the government came up. It was a legislative amendment. Now we have put that issue behind us. So from that standpoint, from a policy and a legislative framework standpoint, I think we're in a pretty good shape. Now, for the next phase of growth and give that impetus to the industry, it's very critical to, as I said, bring in more credibility, bring in more certainty and stability into the structure. So I see three particular areas specifically for the services industry which are very critical. One, as Mr. Anil alluded to, is around the input tax credits. One of the stats that I was reading, more than 50% of the litigation that we have in GST is all around credits availability. Now, which is always a very interpretational issue, and there is always a very diverse view or implementation, even in the same state. Different offices in the same state taking different views. So one is around, the first topic definitely is around the input credit availability. If the government can address that, it could give a big fillip to the overall, not just the services sector, but the overall country as well. The second big challenge for us right now is around refunds. Especially in turbulent times like today, cash is the king, right? The whole finance organization is looking up to tax department. Then when are you going to get me all that cash which sits on my balance sheet? So first is the challenge around whether it is liquidatable or not. Now, thanks to measures like intermediary, there's a bit more certainty that we'll get it. But the on-ground challenges in terms of administratively issues around, foreign currency realization, interpretative issues, there's no clarity on the process, officers, there's no timelines to the processes attached. So I think refunds continue to be a challenge for us. So how can the government bring in especially some timelines around it and some standardization of the processes?
There was something around 90% to be given
There
in
is
60
a
days.
provisional allotment, provisional refund which has been introduced, good, but at least we haven't really experienced it benefiting us still. So how that really translates on the ground, and that is my third aspect, that while from a policy front, from an intent front, we are heading in the right direction, it is the on-ground implementation which continues to be a challenge. There is still a big disconnect between what is said and what is done. So I think the on-ground implementation in terms of compliance, in terms of audits, in terms of refund processing, I think that, to my mind, and not just around GST, in the overall tax administration, to my mind, that remains the biggest challenge. If we can improve the way we deal with the taxpayers and their concerns at the ground level, it will not only reduce litigation, it will just buoy the overall sentiment very much. So I think these are the three key factors for me.
On the latter point, do you think having more effective SOPs could be the way forward?
Absolutely. I think that is what is really missing. As I said, to bring in that consistency. So even around refund processing, what are the kind of questions or what have to be asked, or maybe bring in some automation around it. The government, our digitization journey has honestly been exceptional. I mean, I kind of look out more than 50 countries. The state of digitization that we have in the Indian tax administration is above par. I mean, we are ways and means beyond most developed nations as well. Now, really putting it into practice and bringing in that uniformity across these processes is the next phase of evolution that this framework has to go through, in my view.
Piyush, since you also are responsible for the transfer pricing function, and I'm going to go a little off script here. The government did bring in a safe harbor regime.
Yeah.
Was that helpful to you?
Oh, absolutely. I think that is going to be a game changer for the industry. Again, I keep coming back that how it is translated on the ground is going to be the biggest challenge. In terms of the policy and in terms of the intent, I think this single measure has the potential of completely transforming the Indian IT, ITS and industry space.
Super.
It gives great clarity, great framework. Now the only challenge remains, how is it going to be actually implemented and administered on the ground?
So Anil, when the rate cuts happened and everybody got excited in this country, and there was buoyancy in the economy at that time. We didn't have the Middle East wars at that point either. How did the benefits of the rate cut move to the consumer, and did you see some benefits getting into your price system and then of course into the demand for the economy?
Yeah, so I think the rate cut, particularly for the auto industry, was a very, very big boon for the auto industry, and it actually helped the auto industry a lot. Because the rate cuts, if I were to talk of the small cars, so the earlier it used to range between 29 to 31% depending on the type of the fuel, etc. It straight away came down to 18%. So 11% on maybe a 5 lakh car turns out to 55,000 rupees. 55,000 even for a middle class person is a good amount. If we see on the larger cars also, the rate used to exist with the cess, I'm saying, from 43% to 50% depending on the type and the fuel of the car. That also got down to 40%. So on the bigger cars also there was a rate cut. On the smaller cars, two-wheelers also got down to 18%. So I think overall put together it was a big buoyancy for the auto sector. And we have seen there's a increasing demand of the cars and the two-wheelers, as also the commercial sector also. Since September 25 and all these rate cuts were announced, the auto industry, I think not only for Maruti, but I can say most of the auto industry, they passed on the entire benefit of this tax to the customer. So that was a totally given fact that on the 22nd of September 2025, when this announcement got effective, the entire benefit till the last rupee was passed on to the customer. Not only for the cars and the two-wheeler, but also for the spare parts, because the spare parts also used to attract maybe 28% or 18% depending on the type of the part. But now after that rate rationalization, everything went down to 18%. So on the this side also, the entire benefit of the tax was passed on to the customer, and so we are seeing the growing demand from the customer. And it is still happening. Of course, there has been some disturbance because of this war situation and the fuel situation, but by and large, the auto industry has been going fine because of the demand. And also on the servicing side, because the spare parts pricing has fallen down on some parts, so there also we are seeing a good demand.
Are you seeing something around the export competitiveness also coming through with this?
Yeah, so export competitiveness, because so far as the tax rate is concerned, it doesn't make much of a difference, because in any way we were getting the refunds of the export side, the components, or we were able to adjust against our domestic supply. So either side of the story. On auto industry, if I were to look at the entire auto industry, our majority of the sales, maybe you can say 85 to 90% happens in the domestic market, 10 to 15% is export market. But yes, refunds have been faster, I will say. On the procedure side, the government, whatever they have evolved the procedures and the process, the refunds have been faster. But yes, on the ground, if something more can be done on the refund side, I think it will make both the industry side and the government side also a happier situation, I will say.
So, Azim, if you had to answer that question, what can be done on the refund side, which Anil is asking for?
I think he already mentioned basically it's about how we kind of implement and get this executed. Because one basically is that that we already have all the data available with the online and so on and so forth. So I think with this ecosystem we should be able to implement it correctly with the right balance. I think we should be able to get it.
Okay, all of you are often in the boardrooms, not just in India, but around the world. You're often talking to your global head of taxes. 10 years ago, if you had to describe the indirect taxes landscape of India, you probably would have used words like saying it's fragmented, it's messy, it's so. How would you describe, in a word or two, India's indirect tax landscape today?
I think I personally believe that we are globally competitive in terms of the indirect tax landscape. So when I look at the globe, our policies and procedures are not very different from what you see across the globe. As I said, it's just the on-ground issues which still need to be resolved. But I would put it as that we are globally competitive when it comes to the indirect tax system now.
Super. And that augurs well because with close to 100,000 people in India, you are one of the largest employment generation organizations. So it's always good to know that you guys are doing well.
My take will also be that we are very, very globally competitive in terms of the entire structure which has been developed. It's a very, very seamless type of a tax structure. There are not much of I will say, ineligible credits going. Yeah, there's something, but by and large, it is very good. And the broadly procedures, policies of the government, they have been extremely industry friendly. If something can be done slightly on this audits and the litigation, that will be extremely, extremely beneficial for the entire industry. So totally seamless.
Yeah, organized, for sure, definitely competitive, but still a long way to go on simplification.
Yeah. But did we get to what the Prime Minister said, one market, one tax? Are we close to it or are we nearly close to it?
I think we are there. There is still, I heard recently a news article that Maharashtra seems to be again evaluating the idea of introducing entertainment taxes or somewhere down south as well. So I think those are the things that we need to keep at bay. I think we have reached a structure. The recent rate rationalization has also brought in a greater level or even more simplification into the rate structure. But I think, as my friend alluded to, I think the next step is going to be how do we really simplify the complex compliance mechanisms that we have? How do we really use our digital infrastructure and use this whole, the way we are using technology to really simplify the lives of tax professionals and make it more seamless?
So thank you, Azim. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Anil. These are really wonderful insights. GST at 9, and it could be very different at GST at 10 because I think the government is making sure that they can deliver a competitive and an efficient tax regime to this country. Yep. As I try to capture the conversation that just took place, they spoke highly of the efficiency of our system and where it has come from where it was, how it has globally evolved into an ecosystem that's helpful. And of course, the need of the hour is around simplification in relation to some of the provisions and interpretations, equally around the audits and assessments. Disputes continues to be a little area of bother, and therefore, what can India do to make sure it doesn't get into the quagmire of disputes that it has often been troubled with. And of course, it's got some best practices that it can share with the rest of the world, but it could also bring in some more best practices to unlock some of the working capital that the industry needs. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.